Let's shape and bake a sourdough loaf with inclusions today. We are going to be doing inclusions with cheddar cheese and everything bagel seasoning, but you could really do anything that your heart desires. It's fun to get creative here. You can do sweet, you can do savory, whatever sounds good to you. You're going to want some flour and your metal bench scraper for this step, and some already ready to go sourdough that has been done bulk fermenting. You're going to laminate your dough out onto the counter just enough to where you have a flat surface to add all of your fun ingredients to. You don't want it to be too thin to where it could easily tear, or too thick. You just want to spread it out kind of like you would a pizza crust. Once it's all spread out, you're going to add your inclusions. Today, it is sharp cheddar cheese, and we have freshly grated this from the block. You can also use bagged if you prefer, or if you want to cube up your cheese, you can certainly do that too. I really like the way that shredded goes into the loaf and melts really nicely. So we're going to get that evenly spread throughout the top of our laminated dough here. Keep in mind, the more cheese you use, the more it may add a little added weight to your loaf, and it may not rise quite as much in the oven because of the grease in the cheese, and that's okay. It just tastes just as good, but just bear in mind. And then we're going to sprinkle our everything bagel seasoning liberally over this. There's no measurements when it comes to inclusions. You kind of just got to measure with your heart. Then we are going to fold this as we do our regular sourdough loaf, half into the middle, then the other half, and then we are going to add a little bit more of the inclusion onto this plain part before we roll it on up. This is just going to give it a nice marbling effect when we go to cut into it to ensure that we have even inclusions throughout the dough. From here, we're going to roll it up gently. When you have inclusions in the dough, it tends to be a little bit more susceptible to tearing, so just be careful when you're doing this step. We're going to do a couple turns on top of the counter just to create some tension on top of the dough. Pinch those sides closed as best as we can, and we're going to flour the top of our dough ball and transfer into a seasoned Banneton basket for at least 8 hours to proof in the fridge. Once your dough is done proofing in the fridge for 8 to 72 hours, you can pull it out and flip it out onto a piece of parchment paper. And we're going to sprinkle with a little bit more of our flour over the top here so that we can get a nice contrast to our scoring. Now it's time to score the dough. You are going to use your bread lawn that came in your sourdough baking kit and score it however you'd like. This time I'm doing an X score across the top of my dough. I find that it really showcases the inclusions really well when it is done this way. You can certainly just do a single expansion score, some decorative scoring, whatever you think will look best on your loaf. And then we are going to place this dough in a preheated Dutch oven that was preheating in the oven for at least an hour at 450 degrees. We're going to place our dough inside, cover it up with the lid, and bake for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then take the lid off and bake for an additional 10 to 15 minutes until it gets to your desired browning on the outside. And this is what it should look like when it comes out. It is so yummy smelling in here. It is so delicious. Every time you bake with different inclusions, it will yield a little bit of a different look on the outside of your loaf, which is so much fun. This time you can really see everything really beautifully on the inside because of that X score across the top. And I promise you, this is going to taste so delicious. You are going to make friends everywhere you go if they taste your bread. Look at the bottom of our dough here. It is perfectly browned and not burned. And see how I said how the dough can flatten out just a little bit if you put cheese on the inside? Don't worry, that's normal. It happens, but it melted so beautifully in the crumb. Every bite is going to have cheesy and everything bagel goodness. And we are going to slice this up. And I like to flip it onto its side like this and slice individual pieces this way. I find it gives you really nice control over the knife and the bread. And look at how yummy that looks. It is so spongy, so perfectly fermented. We used the same bulk fermentation timing according to the chart as we would our regular loaf.